An old, rust-covered camera was recently discovered deep in the icy depths near the Titanic wreckage, and what it contained shocked the world. The photos from its fragile film offer a disturbing perspective on the fateful night the ship went down. These haunting images reveal moments never seen before, moments of fear, tragedy, and mystery that change everything we thought we knew. What horrifying secrets did this camera capture? Join us as we uncover the disturbing Titanic photos from the camera found in the deep ocean. Where the Titanic came from. Before we dive into the sad story, let's take a quick look at the Titanic's origin. The name Titanic was inspired by the Titans in Greek myths. It was built in Belfast, Ireland, back when the area was part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. The Titanic was the second in a group of 3 massive ships called the Olympic-class ocean liners. The first ship in this series was the Olympic, and the last one was the Britannic. These ships were the biggest ones owned by the British company White Star Line, which had a total of 29 steam-powered ships in the year 1912. The idea for these 3 ships came up in the middle of 1907, during a chat between J. Bruce Ismay, who was the boss of White Star Line, and J.P. Morgan, an American businessman who owned the company controlling White Star Line. The construction of these ships was handled by Harland and Wolff, a shipbuilding company in Belfast that had been working with White Star Line since 1867. Harland and Wolff were given a lot of freedom in designing the ships. Usually, one of the designers, Wilhelm Wolff, would come up with a rough idea, and Edward James Harland would turn that into a proper ship plan. Money wasn't a big concern for these ships. Harland and Wolff were allowed to spend whatever they needed, along with an extra 5% as their profit. For the first 2 Olympic-class ships, the agreed cost was £3 million, which would be worth about £370 million in 2023, plus additional expenses and the usual profit percentage. Harland and Wolff brought in their top experts to design the Olympic-class ships. The team was led by Lord Perry, who worked for both Harland and Wolff and the White Star Line. Thomas Andrews, who managed the design department at Harland and Wolff, also played a big role. He had help with his deputy, Edward Wilding, who handled things like the ship's stability and balance. Another key figure was Alexander Carlisle, the shipyard's head drafter and general manager. Carlisle took care of the decorations, equipment, and overall layout, including figuring out how to set up lifeboats in the best way. On the July 29, 1908, Harland and Wolff showed their ship designs to J. Bruce Ismay and other leaders at White Star Line. Ismay liked what he saw and gave the green light 2 days later by signing 3 agreements to start building the ships. At first, the first ship, which later became the Olympic, didn't even have a name. It was just called Number 400 because it was the 400th ship Harland and Wolff had built. The Titanic, often called the unsinkable ship, was finished on March 31, 1911, but it wouldn't be long before it faced a huge test that would question whether it truly deserved that title. What happens next will show us the truth.
When the RMS Titanic started its first journey in the year 1912, people thought it was unsinkable. This trip, which was supposed to go across the Atlantic Ocean from England to America, caught everyone's attention, not just because the ship was huge, but also because it was incredibly fancy. The Titanic was about 882 feet long and 92 feet wide. When fully loaded, it weighed over 52,000 tons. That size allowed for lots of amazing features. The first-class area had veranda cafes, a gym, a swimming pool, and even luxurious Turkish baths. It seemed like everything about the Titanic was perfect, but this dream didn't last. Just 4 days after leaving port, the ship hit an iceberg and sank in less than 3 hours. The unsinkable ship was gone. The Titanic was built to hold 64 lifeboats, but for some reason it only carried 20. 4 of those were collapsible, which didn't make things any easier when it came time to evacuate. To make matters worse, it took about an hour for the first lifeboat to be lowered into the water, and even then, most of the boats weren't filled to their full capacity. The Titanic sent out distress signals, hoping for help. While some ships responded, most of them were too far away to make it in time. The closest ship, the RMS Carpathia, was about 58 miles away and immediately began heading toward the Titanic after receiving the distress call. It took 2 hours and 40 minutes for the Titanic to completely sink after hitting the iceberg. Unfortunately, the RMS Carpathia didn't arrive until about an hour after the ship went under. Thankfully, its crew was able to save survivors and bring them aboard. Out of the estimated 2,224 passengers and crew on the Titanic, around 1,500 lost their lives. Only about 700 people survived, and most of them were women and children. The survivors finally reached New York on April 18th. Even though the Titanic sank, it wasn't forgotten. Soon after the tragedy, plans were made to recover what could be salvaged from the wreck, but even that came with its own set of challenges. Initial attempts to recover the Titanic's wreckage. Right after the Titanic sank on April 15, 1912, people started coming up with ideas to recover it from the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. At the time, though, no one knew exactly where it was or what kind of shape it was in. Some wealthy families who had lost loved ones in the disaster, like the Guggenheims, Astors, and Wideners, teamed up and hired the Merritt and Chapman Derrick and Wrecking Company to try and bring the Titanic back up. But the project didn't get far. The divers couldn't even come close to reaching the incredible depth where the Titanic rested, where the water pressure is over 6,000 pounds per square inch. At one point, the company thought about using dynamite to break apart the wreck and bring bodies to the surface, but they eventually gave up. Ocean experts at the time believed the pressure at those depths would have crushed the bodies into jelly-like lumps. Interestingly, they were wrong about that. Scientists didn't discover until 1987 that corpses filled with water can remain mostly intact at the bottom. This discovery was made using the same submersible that explored the Titanic a year earlier. The cold water and high pressure where the Titanic sank would have stopped gases from forming and decomposing bodies, which kept them from floating back up to the surface. Over the years, people came up with all sorts of ideas to bring the Titanic back up.
Back to the surface. Most of these plans didn't work out because of practical issues, not enough money, or a poor understanding of the conditions deep underwater. In March of 1914, Charles Smith, an architect from Denver, suggested using a submarine with electromagnets to locate the Titanic's steel hull. Once they found it, more magnets would be sent down from barges to pull the ship to the surface. The plan was estimated to cost $1.2 million, which would be about $35.5 million today. It was too expensive and unrealistic, so it never happened. Another idea involved using balloons to lift the ship. The plan was to attach the balloons to the Titanic's hull with magnets, and once enough were in place, the ship would float up. But like the first idea, this one stayed on paper. In the mid-1960s, an English hosiery worker named Douglas Woolley also tried to use nylon balloons to raise the ship, but technical issues stopped his plan. By the 1970s, people had come up with other wild ideas like filling the wreck with wax, ping-pong balls, or glass spheres, but these were either too expensive or just didn't make sense. Someone even thought of freezing the Titanic in an ice jacket using liquid nitrogen, but that idea didn't go anywhere either. Many people and groups tried to find or salvage the Titanic. In 1977, Robert Ballard attempted to locate it with a salvage vessel, but failed. Walt Disney and National Geographic thought about funding an expedition, but backed out because of the high costs. British tycoons, James Goldschmidt, wanted to find the Titanic to promote his magazine, but had to stop because of money troubles. Fred Kigger, an electronics repairman from Florida, tried to build a submersible to search for treasure, but couldn't get the funding. Other plans, like using giant tankers with cranes, were also talked about, but never happened. In July 1980, a Texan oilman named Jack Grimm led an expedition to search for the Titanic. He got the money for this trip through sponsorship deals, media rights, and a donation from Columbia University for sonar equipment. Even though he brought along top scientists, the team ran into problems. Bad weather and broken equipment ruined their efforts, and they couldn't find anything definite. A documentary called Search for the Titanic came out in 1981, narrated by Orson Welles to tell the story of this attempt. Grimm didn't give up and tried again in June 1981 with better sonar technology. The team rechecked some areas they thought might hold clues, but it turned out the targets were just natural features. At one point, they spotted something that looked like a propeller, but they couldn't confirm it was from the Titanic. Another documentary, Returned to the Titanic, also released in 1981, shared this expedition's story. Grimm made a third attempt in July 1983, but it also didn't work out. Poor weather and limited technology stopped the team from finding the ship. What's surprising is that their equipment actually passed right over or near the wreck without detecting it. Even though these expeditions failed, the determination to find the Titanic eventually paid off. When it seemed like all hope was gone, solutions finally appeared, helping to solve the mystery of the ship's resting place.